Welcome to Conversations with Cox and Kielseth, and to be more specific, that is filmmaker Alex Cox and myself, film curator Pablo Kielseth. Alex will join us by phone from his home in Oregon, while I sneak away from my office to call him from one of the projection booths used by the International Film Series, which has been screening foreign and independent movies at CU Boulder since 1941. We will keep our chats to about 20 minutes as we discuss whatever movie-related topics grab our fancy. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, action.
Alex, it's another week's gone by, and this time I wanted to discuss documentaries with you. And the reason why is because Zippera Films has announced a virtual cinema series, and they're going to be featuring classic Frederick Wiseman films each week. And the selections are being curated by some of the top filmmakers in the field. They're going to be joining Mr. Wiseman for a pre-recorded conversation prior to the films, with a new one being featured each Wednesday as part of a series called Wednesdays with Wiseman. And this is all leading up to the release of his latest documentary, City Hall, which will be getting its Boulder premiere on November 13th. But before that, if you want to tune in on October 21st, you can see Ballet. And again, each one of these is going to have some extra added content. I think it's going to be a nice way, a lively way to lead into the latest, greatest Wiseman film. But anyway, October 21st, and for that week, it's going to be Ballet. October 28th, it's going to be the Sinai Field Mission. November 4th, Hospital. And leads up to November 13th, Boulder premiere of City Hall. I mean, Frederick Wiseman's pretty amazing. He's like 90 years old. He's been doing this a long time. He's one of those directors who's doing stuff that makes a difference. I mean, Titicut Follies famously, it was both considered one of the most disturbing documentaries. And it was so disturbing that it was basically kept from the public for a while. And but it made a difference. It actually had an impact on how people were treated, and he's been at it
in mental hospitals, right?
Yeah. But he's been at it for a long time. But the last time we screened one of his movies at the International Film Series, it was just 2 years ago with Ex Libris, New York Public Library. And I have to say that was such a fascinating look into everything that goes into making a library function, both behind the scenes and for the public, and how the public has a voice in there, but also the politics. And he takes his time. They're oftentimes quite long. He's kind of known as a fly on the wall director, but he's really just one of the top documentary filmmakers. And it's amazing he's still around, and I'm glad that he is, because he's still got a lot of life and passion, and he really puts the magnifying glass where it needs to be. With that in mind, I'm going to stop yakking, and I just thought, the fact is that when I'm talking with you, you haven't just directed a bunch of wonderful features, but you've also got a good history of documentary films that you've directed. On Dennis Hopper and Kurosawa, and also on
the Emmanuel movies.
Yeah, so I wanted to hand the baton to you and just ask you to reflect a little bit on the documentary form and the different ways in which people have used it, but using your own experiences.
All the documentaries that I've done are just like the sorrow and the pity. In the sense that it's just interviews interspersed with archive footage. It's the most basic meat and potatoes documentary filmmaking you can do. But also, I find it the most entertaining, the most interesting, because I think when they shot Sorrow and the Pity, which is a documentary about the Second World War and it's a French documentary, and they talk about the way the French behaved under German occupation, the way the English behaved towards the French. And it's very interesting and very revealing. And it's all just like that. It's like just medium shots of guys talking when they didn't really know what they were going to say. So it's not scripted in any way. And then it's interspersed with all this archival footage. And it's incredible. So that's the classic way, isn't it? And then there's these other ways of doing a documentary, like you have an on-camera presenter who, whether it's Michael Moore or Dinesh D'Souza, but they take you through the thing, And then there's the Wiseman, where there isn't a talking head ever. There's just, this is what's happening, and here's what's happening there.
I've always felt that there's always kind of like that. There's sort of variations of the Fly on the Wall documentary, and then there's variations of the Fly in the Soup documentary, which would be like the Michael Moore approach, or
I think it's unfortunate in a way, because the documentary. Oh, there's also the scripted documentary. Don't forget, there were these documentaries that were made, like the one about the night train, the one about the one about the English night mail, a documentary about English postal train.
Yeah,
which was pre-scripted, and they went out, and they had a script for it, a poem or something, and they went out and they shot the footage per what the documentary said, and you can do documentaries like that as well, and there's fake documentaries.
Nanook of the North, one of the, which was like 1922, and that was one of the famous docs that got a little bit of flack for sort of scripting some parts out, right?
Yeah, or the white helmet thing, the whole white helmet thing, the scam of like creating this fake kind of humanitarian resistance thing, and then getting it, and then making a documentary about it, and then winning the Oscar. It's or think of The War Game by Peter Watkins, the most amazing film ever, the most amazing film about the danger of nuclear war and the consequences of nuclear war, won the Oscar in 1967 for Best Documentary. And it's not a documentary. It's a drama about things that haven't happened yet, But it's set as it's a what we now call a mockumentary, It's a fictional documentary, an imaginary one. So the whole idea of documentary is a very broad church, isn't it?
Yeah. And it feels expansive and expanding in terms of both its potential and also the ability to kind of hook people in. I remember, it's kind of an old hobby horse of mine, because I really didn't care for the Blair Witch Project, but one of the things about that particular film that made it so successful is that when it came out, I think it was just like timing, because there had been sort of horror mockumentaries before. There was, there was Cannibal Holocaust, there was, Man Bites Dog, and some other things like that. But Blair Witch Project really just, it took off. And I think one of the reasons why is because there was an intersection between a generation of people that had been weaned on reality TV, and that movie came in at a time where they were so susceptible to that format that, I just remember some of the staff workers at the IFS who were cashiers and managers, that they'd been hearing the rumors that this was like a true thing. Yeah, that it was real. And they were genuinely freaked out. Whereas, I saw it at Sundance, and I couldn't believe when at the Eccles Theater, it was the largest theater at Sundance. I don't want to step on toes here, but the Blair Witch Project bored me to tears, and it just didn't scare me at all. But at the same time, I recognize that it electrified this giant hall with over 1,000 people.
Interesting.
And I overheard these young kids around me saying, "This is the scariest thing I've ever seen."
Interesting.
And I just realized at that point, I'm out of touch. I'm not connecting. I have no idea. But I'm just saying that, to take it a step further, we now have a reality TV president. So there's some dangers in terms of people not being literate in terms of the grammars to recognize when they're being sort of fooled by what passes as almost like a mockumentary style, and which is extremely unfortunate. But I'm sort of veering off topic here a little bit, but because everything has to be in context. It's not like Orange Man Bad, is just a kind of a weird aberration that was sent here by the demon Stasi leader Putin, to mess up Americans' lives. He's just the latest in a long row of neoliberal, hypocritical, ineffective presidents.
and it's a system that exists. And so what I like to see is documentaries that address the system, address what's actually happening. And what I become suspicious of is when it is Dinesh D'Souza or Michael Moore or somebody, because then it's like personality politics. Then it's like, Donald Trump is my guy, or Joe Biden, he's my guy, because neither of these guys is out for you or me or anybody but the mega rich. And yet the personality-driven politics enables them to run without ever addressing policy.
And the personality-driven documentary, not just politics, but the personality-driven documentary with the fly in the soup documentary, right?
Yeah, and so I'm opposing the fly in the soup, and I'm saying 2 thumbs up for the fly on the wall.
I'm 2 thumbs up for the fly on the wall. So again, I want to just remind folks that when we're giving 2 thumbs up to fly on the wall type documentary filmmakers, Frederick Wiseman, he's your man, and he's got a new film out, and you can watch it at internationalfilmseries.com. And I should also add real quickly that there's going to be some really interesting things coming down the pipeline that are also documentaries. Next month, there's a documentary called Collective, and this is one I happened to screen at Sundance. And it's about the fire at the Bucharest Collective Club that left 27 people dead. That was back in 2015. So it was 27 people dead, 180 injured. And it's a fascinating look that goes, because the filmmakers team up with investigative journalists, and it just reveals and uncovers healthcare fraud and all kinds of other things.
Have you seen the documentary?
I did. Yeah, no. And I thought it was riveting from start to finish.
Is there a guy called Craig Murray in it? A guy who was a British diplomat, and he wasn't the ambassador there, but he was part of the English diplomatic thing there.
That I don't remember.
He's written something about that. If I remember correctly, he's written something anyway about a terrible fire in a disco in an Eastern European country, and he was there with the diplomatic service, and how the whole thing was a disaster, both the fire and the aftermath, and the dealing with it was just
the aftermath is even. Oh no, the aftermath was even worse. It was worse. The level of corruption ended up. Ended up really like it killed a lot more people beyond the immediate fire because of it's a long story, but I mean, they interview journalists, whistleblowers, burn victims, government officials, and it's a fascinating story. I can't wait to see it. That sounds like I really want to see that documentary. So this is very good. We'll give that one its own show. There's also on November 27th. There's going to be one on Frank Zappa, and I think that one's going to be fun. So and I really, Zappa's just one of those artists, musicians who was just so within his own. He really set the template for marching to the beat of his own drum. And I think that one's going to be great too. So I just kind of want to give a little heads up to folks that we got a lot of cool, interesting documentaries coming up. Yeah, I don't want to belabor these points. We'll focus specifically on Collective later. And for the moment, we wanted to use this podcast today to say, if you like documentaries, you got to have Frederick Wiseman on your radar. And why not check out his latest, but also recognize that there's going to be these special offerings where they will be giving extra added content. And I should also add that, with Frederick Wiseman, boy, he comes out with some pretty long documentaries. So you'll get bang for your buck when it comes to, like City Hall is 272 minutes. So you'll get your money's worth.
Wow, that is 4.5 hours long, plus 2 minutes extra.
And you get to actually get a really incisive look into how things work.
Well, I guess that's right, and that's what Peter Watkins, who did the War Game, was very strongly against, was the idea of being trapped in these formats where a documentary or a feature has to be an hour and a half. Or at the most 2.5 hours, and a TV episode has to be like 56 minutes or 52 or 26 or,
Yeah,
Anyway,
Wiseman always is there for as long as it needs to be there to get to the information that he wants to get, and
yeah.
he takes his time. So,
Another very good fly on the wall, an amazing epic fly on the wall, is Koyaanisqatsi.
which one?
Koyaanisqatsi, Godfrey Reggio's documentary. Koyaanisqatsi.
Yeah, no. I mean,
you remember.
and that's actually that ties into the for me that was one of those very prescient ecological minded sort of not narrative in the traditional sense, because it just lets images tell the story, of course, and then the Philip Glass score comes in and just really makes sure that the tone is understood. Very sort of an apocalyptic tone. Yeah, I was floored the first time I saw it. And I've actually, we had Godfrey Reggio out at the International Film Series with Koyaanisqatsi, boy, a few decades ago, but he was a very fun, interesting guest. He's very tall and he's always walking around with like very elegant scarves, very engaging, very entertaining. But we'll wrap it up here. So,
oh no, but wait! But I want to talk about because the IFS has shown some really great documentaries, and I thought about two more.
Oh yeah, go for it.
One was one that you and I saw together, Leviathan.
Yeah, Lucian Taylor and Verena Paravel. I hope I'm saying her name right. Yeah, co-directed.
It was excellent fly on the wall documentary about a massive factory fishing ship.
I agree.
And it was a tremendous documentary, I thought. Very much in that style.
Yes.
Although only an hour and a half long, though, not a long one.
Nope.
And also a film that I know you showed, but we didn't see it together, Rumble.
Right. Yeah, Rumble was great.
It was great.
Yeah.
Rumble, the American Indian rocker movie, and it's got like great stuff about Link Ray and Robbie Robertson of the band, and Buffy Sainte-Marie, who I didn't realize Buffy Sainte-Marie is a profound character, and I learned a lot from the documentary.
That's a great one because it's got wonderful music, and it covers a lot of ground. So it's both entertaining and it's educational, and yeah, I definitely learned a lot of things about musicians that I didn't know had indigenous blood and legacy in them. That was a great one. The ones that also come to my mind, Bisbee 17 by Robert Greene, that was released in 2018.
Oh yeah, that was good too. That was really good. Yeah. That nice recreation of the Bisbee kind of
massacre.
Or just massacre and kidnapping. That they just kidnapped the people and just stuck them on a freight train and sent them out to the middle of the desert in New Mexico, right?
Yeah, and it has a lot to say about unions and
yeah, it's very good. Very interesting. And also the way they phrased it, because they had the people who were relatives of or the descendants of the people who'd been involved in the original displacement and massacre on both sides. So you had the family of the guards and the descendants of the guards and the goons also like sticking up for their, they were getting those troublemakers out of town.
Right. And it had unexpected humor too, when it matched up these colorful people from the town, and it showed the divisions within the town and within families that had persisted, even
for a century.
Yeah, for a century. It was a fascinating, wonderful, complicated. That to me is an example of a documentary that is neither just fly on the wall or fly in the soup. It actually inhabits something kind of its own terrain, which I wouldn't even know how to. It's more of a brumblefly of sorts, because it's actually interfering with the timeline.
Well, and also because there isn't any archival, or there isn't sufficient archival footage of that great crime. Because why would they have been filming it? So they recreate it, but to recreate it with the descendants of the people who were actually involved, that was quite fascinating.
It was, but they were always being very straightforward, so there was never any question as to what was going on. They were not trying to fool people in any way. When they were, when they went to this place, they were like, well, we're going to go to this place to do some recreations, and then boom, suddenly you realize that there's a lot more going on.
Extras needed. You put up a sign that says extras needed, and the people who are going to come along are locals, and they're going to have an opinion about it,
Yeah. I will just briefly, just while I'm thinking of it, say, I got to give a shout out to Grey Gardens by the Maisel Brothers, Gates of Heaven by Errol Morris from, released 1978, and Burden of Dreams by Les Blank.
Oh, that's great. That's a really good documentary. Yeah.
Yeah, especially for any pet lovers out there. Not Burden of Dreams, but Gates of Heaven for the pet lovers, and then Burden of Dreams for anyone who...
It's an excellent documentary. It's an extremely good documentary, which to a certain extent overshadowed the film itself.
Well, all right, sir. Thank you for joining me and for talking about documentaries. I'm going to ask you to give the pups a scruff for me and tell Todd that I said hello.
And my love to everybody in Boulder. And individually, I want you to go around and give them all obviously physically distanced hug for me.
Yeah, well, hugging's out of the question at this point.
Physically distanced. Physically distanced.
I've hugged 2 people, and I think 3 people in 6 months. Yeah, but I get your meaning, and they will hear from you through me, and we'll talk again next week. Thanks, man.
All right, thank you.
All right,
bye.
Yep, ciao.
Cut. Okay, that's a wrap.
Thanks again for joining Alex Cox and myself today. I'd like to thank Jason Phelps for handling the audio and Ted Thacker for letting us use the intro to his song, The Ballad of Slim Cessna, for the musical cues that bookend these conversations.